Hi, my name's Dee and welcome to Sunchild Tarot, and welcome again to our look at this total eclipse in Sagittarius, the end of the Gemini-Sag eclipses, and welcome as ever to our resident astrologer, David Fischer. How are you doing, David?
Hey Dee, glad to be here. It's nice to be here for another eclipse.
Yeah, there's I'm now all the oh my god, something is eating the sun and the unpredictable nature of eclipses aside, I quite like the look of this one, although I don't think it's going to be an easy ride. Would that be a fair assessment?
Well, it's always fair to say that an eclipse is not going to be an easy ride because of the volatility inherent to the condition, you know. But this one in particular is not that menacing because, well, as you will see in the chart in a bit, I'll just share it. It's not that challenged, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. So this is how the new moon looks like from my perspective here in São Paulo, Brazil. This is when it happens. Don't worry, the positions of the planet is mainly what we're going to talk about. And this one is more fortunate because it's on the ascendant, so we can use the houses relative to the eclipse. Now, it's not as menacing as the previous ones because those previous ones had Mars in Libra with the sun and the moon. The other one here had Mars still in Scorpio with them. And then now we have finally a lunation where Mars is far enough away from the sun to be in another sign, in aversion to it. And in a better condition as well, because Mars is in its own domicile. So it's not going to be as harmful. Let's put it like that. Now, we have some challenge to this eclipse besides the fact that it's a volatile aspect on itself, especially because Mercury is present in the configuration. This particular factor is important because Mercury is in detriment. Mercury is always close to the sun, but being in one of his essential debilities is going to provide for a scenario where mercurial events, mercurial factors, mercurial people represented in our lives are going to be challenged. They are going to be representing something challenging to deal with. They're going to represent impediments or flaws in the plan, things that you didn't account for. These kinds of things tend to happen when Mercury, the ruler of the planning and the schedule, is not as well favored in the chart. It's under the beams of the sun, meaning it's invisible, you cannot see it in the sky. And it's, again, in its detriment, Sagittarius, a sign where it doesn't have much, with which it doesn't have much familiarity. And that means that contest, which is a mercurial word, is going to bring this instability. It's going to be one of the main factors bringing stability to this particular configuration of this eclipse. Now, I was mentioning that it's not going to be as menacing. So these contests that are going to be brought up, these particular challenges, which are going to be, you know, again, flaws in the plan. I didn't foresee this. I didn't account for that particular possibility. They might even be good possibilities. There might be things that you were not hoping for that are presented to you and offer you a change of perspective, a change in a pattern that you were repeating in your routine, a change to everything that you were planning, but a good change. But you're still confused. You still don't know if that's going to work out. You still don't know the whole story about that new thing that came up. You only have the possibilities. You only have the opportunities. You only have, as we can say, the aces, as in the tarot, the ace in which suit is going to give you the possibilities within that particular element. So it is very fertile in the sense that it gives you too many directions to go to, but it's still just a potential. It's nothing more than that. And so it gives you that sense of insecurity to move forward with. especially it feels unstable, and that's how it should feel because it's an eclipse season.
Yeah, there seems to, I mean, one thing that we was discussing beforehand, one thing that I noticed in the chat is that there seems to be a potential clash of philosophies, and it's not necessarily even an external clash. It's here's my natural pathway, and the natural pathway that I'm on looks like it will end up in a good place, but I had been dreaming about that place. That's good, but you know, and there's this dichotomy of having what's good for you, for you, or what your momentum is taking you towards a good place, but it's not quite what you was after.
Exactly. It's not quite what you're after because you have some change in why you desired that thing in the first place. And this is a part of the contest here. This is a part of the debate. Do I even still want that? Is the plan does the plan not seem to be working because I'm not as invested as I thought I would be? Is there something else to it rather other than, you know, the practical factors? Am I not considering the more subjective nature of my actions, you know? And this is all about philosophy. What's motivating your actions? What's behind the smile that you gave to someone in your workspace? What's behind that particular invitation to dinner or to go to a movie or to anything by that particular person that you're not necessarily interested in affectionately, but you accept it anyway? What's behind that? So investigating those new things that pop up within your personality might be very good for you right now. Not in the sense that you can do everything you wish for, but do make an effort to notice the things that don't seem to fit with the previous narrative, the things that seem a little odd, like I shouldn't be enjoying myself this much with this, or I shouldn't be suffering so much over something that I keep telling myself that is not that important. If I am suffering like this, then there must be something important in it, you know, and make those bring up those kinds of questions. This is what Mercury is trying to compel you to do now. And it's favored. Do you want to comment anything on that?
No, I mean, where I had started looking at this was there's a quintile aspect between Jupiter and Neptune, which is, you would think it's making dreams bigger. But there's also the actual eclipse itself is quintile Jupiter, but it's all the Jupiter is square the North Node. So it's like what's getting bigger is not necessarily the direction that you're heading in.
Well, very well put. Yeah, very well put. Mutable signs actually have that quality of you are going to complete something, but the results, especially Sagittarius, are going to be much more multiple than you anticipated, because it's a sign ruled by Jupiter, which is one of the significators for abundance and fertility. So you can expect the ideas that you act upon in this sign to give you varied results, not necessarily as you expected, as all mutable signs do, but they're going to give you abundant results. Things that are like, oh, I could go in this direction, I could go in that direction, or I can go in this direction. And this is where Mercury loses its dignity. Because when you have so many different patterns to follow, how do you define which one to go for? Mercury is about taking things at face value. How the looks of something tells you immediately what its purpose is and how you are going to interact with it. When Mercury is debilitated in one of Jupiter's signs, you just have so many different ways to look at a particular person, a particular scenario, a particular object, that you can't decide what exactly to do with it. The same thing with our inner fire. So I realize now that I have potential, for instance, with this lunation, or I realize that my options are more multiple, or at least different than what I was anticipating, I realize now that what I was taking at face value was actually holding me back, because I was preventing myself from seeing the situation under a new light. And the volatility of the eclipse, the instability and the uncertainty that makes us a bit weary, is actually going to be more motivational at this time, because we are going to be able to realize this, having a little more wiggle room to act towards what we decide is now the better course of action. Now, this wiggle room is going to be conferred by the configuration to the malefics, which is something I was mentioning previously, but didn't get into much detail. You have Mars being in the 12th sign from Sagittarius, which means one sign before, since we only have 12 signs, the 12th sign before Sagittarius is one is Scorpio, obviously. And that is an aversion by classical aspect, meaning this configuration means some kind of indifference between one placement and the next. And in one side, that might be a little bad, because it means that you cannot use that particular planet's strength to contribute to your actions within that particular house you're focusing on, in this case Sagittarius. But also, because this is a malefic, it's a good thing that we don't have another accusatory influence, another instability factor, another kick in the butt, let's say like that, in a situation that is already volatile enough. So this is good. And the sextile, which is a harmonious configuration to Saturn in Aquarius, is only going to help you see the structure that you can apply to whatever new focuses you are trying to have. You can have a future planning and try to go for one of those pathways that are opening up in front of you. You just have to be very clear of why you're doing it. It's not about which path looks brighter, the brightest in comparison to your old point of view, to what you were planning earlier in the year. It's time now to reassess. It's time now to remodel how you feel about things. So just go with what seems more appropriate to you right now, not trying to overthink it, but rather just trying to feel your way through it. That's one way. Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting, because I mean, we've been saying through a lot of the new moons especially, I seem to remember, that there was this: do some planning, now revisit your plans, now have a look at them again. Then there was a couple of lunations where it's like, yeah, go carry on, crack on with your plans. And now all of a sudden, it's almost like there's a dose of practicality that is coming up. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. We have been, because of these transits through Capricorn and Aquarius, focusing too much on the larger scale of things, on the, what limits our perimeter of action. How can we, what's bounding our actions in this moment? So this is a Saturnian outlook. This is how Saturn likes to look at things. And this is what we've been subservient to because of its rulership on Jupiter and Pluto and itself. It's in its own sign.
Yeah.
Now, as Jupiter moves away into Pisces and forward, we will feel a gigantic lifting of that weight. It's going to be really noticeable, as it was earlier in this year when Jupiter ingressed into Pisces, and we had many more relaxations of the pandemic strains that we had, like the border started opening up more. Yada yada. Obviously not everywhere, but people were more hopeful, and people started having more of they started being more able to plan again. But it was just, as we talked about back then when we started, a you were visualizing the future without actually knowing how you were going to achieve it. You saw some of the possibilities, and it was just a teaser for that time. Now, after you got motivated to fight for something, after the whole lockdown, the most oppressive, the thick of it was over, we started then having to deal with the consequences of having the economy stuck for so long, ineffective rulers, and so on, social issues rising up. And now, with Venus stationing retrograde, very close to where Saturn conjoined Pluto, to where Saturn stationed direct last year, squaring Mars, to where Saturn stayed with Jupiter, that latter part of Capricorn, they were very close together. Venus is stationing retrograde at that spot, further emphasizing it, making it clear again. And thus we are seeing now a revisitation of the same things we were seeing when it ingressed Gemini last year, and it retrograded in Gemini in 2020, bringing up social issues after the lockdown started.
Yeah.
Venus was bringing up again these factors, and is making us look in the face of our errors, what we have done wrong, if we have done our part by isolating, or if we have resisted that, why, what are our values, what kind of relationships influence those decisions, where did those relationships take us so far, and things like that. But you do see a repetition of what we were going through earlier last year because of the Venus stationing retrograde in that same area of the sky. And you do see a re-emphasizing of, are we going to stand still again? Are we going to hold our breaths for God knows how long once again? Mm-hmm. And that's not what I think is going to happen. I don't think that we are going to go into the same severity of lockdown that we did last year in 2020. That's not going to repeat itself the same way. But still, especially because we have the tools now, we have the capability of fighting that war against a virus a little better than we had earlier in the pandemic, obviously. And so it cannot be the same. But still, we are seeing new possibilities now, because we are saying, okay, things are going to stay unstable for a while. The results that I'm looking for are not the ones that I exactly wanted to have. And even if they are, I don't feel quite the same way about this particular goal as I used to. And now I have to integrate new parts to it. I have to put new mercurial things into it. I have to experiment. That's one thing for when Mercury is in detriment as well. You cannot take things at face value unless you have the experience with them, and that's what Mercury requires you to do as well in these times. With Mercury, with Venus being in a sextile to Mars, while it's stationing retrograde in Capricorn, we see where our desires since last year have taken us, to where our coping mechanisms have taken us so far with this whole pandemic thing. If we have progressed, how far have we gotten? Why are we still not satisfied? What do we feel is still being held back from us? Like, what do we feel is being denied us as a luxury, or as a comfort, or as something that's going to validate your sense of stability? Why is that being denied right now, if I have taken all the steps that I have proposed myself to take since the last time that I have reassessed my Venusian, stuff? Let's put it like that. Look at where Venus rules in your chart. So if it rules the second house, financial matters. If it rules the seventh house, relationship, even more re-emphasized. 10th house, career. And then add factors related to Venus, such as friends, relationships against the relationships related to your financial areas, if it's the second house rulership, and such things. Just look at the Venusian topics and see how they were back in earlier in the pandemic and how you're treating them now.
Now, we was discussing before the show about Venus, and I was saying how I can't find any relationship between Venus and Saturn through modern aspect, 12th part, angelic rulership, goetic rulership. But I'm obviously stupid because Saturn is ruling Venus.
Yes. Yes, you're not stupid, but yes, Saturn is ruling Venus.
How I missed that great glaring fact. But I'm really interested in Venus because it to me in this chart, it's really shouting out because this is the place, 22 degrees Capricorn is where Mars and Jupiter met March last year. It is where Pluto stationed direct October last year. It's where Saturn and Pluto met January last year, and we all know how well that was fun. And although this doesn't necessarily mean a great deal, it's nicely dramatic. This is Aleister Crowley's Mars, you know. So I really think that there's quite a lot of volume coming from this. Now, it's interesting that you were saying about all this reconsideration about where we're going and what the ideal was. Venus is exactly in a novell aspect, a 40-degree aspect from this eclipse. So the novell aspect is about perfecting an ideal. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that's bringing it into manifestation. It's that you've polished your idea up, or can be that you've polished your idea up. So this reconsideration, this enforced practicality against the, you know, I'm going this way, but my dreams are pulling me over here, and both are getting bigger. But it doesn't look like the world's going to let me perform those dreams. That novell aspect to me is like saying, yeah, but if you actually try and merge the two a little, you know, good bit of spit and polish, you might be getting somewhere. So I'm seeing a lot of practical support, and I'm hoping that all the weird unexpected stuff that we are getting from this eclipse, because we will do, should be mainly beneficial, like you say, with the malefics not being...
I would say so. Not being harmful to it, I would say so. There is some warning here, some caution to have about not acting quick enough, not acting when you have the chance. I'm not saying be as impulsive as you can or as impulsive as you will. Just know that things are not going to become any clearer by stressing over them, by being anxious over them. Right now, you're being asked to act in your best interest with the best you got. And if you feel like you haven't had enough time to think, or if you feel like you haven't had enough time to see what the benefits long term are going to be, benefits short term are going to be, well, this is not the time for that. This is a time, I would say that a square to Saturn would tell you that it's a time for that, but it's not a square to Saturn, it's a sextile. So whatever actions you take right now that are impulsive, you're still going to be pending to be impulsive towards the more responsible side because of that sextile. You see what I mean?
Yes.
If it were a square, I would tell you, try to be a bit more careful, because you want, like the last lunation, you will want to act, but there is something stopping you from doing so. And you need to slow down. This time around, you don't necessarily need to slow down. You actually need to speed up the process a little bit and learn that a good structure, to keep up the good structure to your plans, you need to give it some heat. You need to, you know, start moving things around a bit, even though if it's not exactly as you plan at first, they need to have some movement. They need to have some action poured into them in order to manifest, as you were saying, something.
Now, obviously, as we was discussing, is the end of the Gemini Sag eclipses for another 9 years. And it's a south node eclipse, isn't it? So there's an element of, it's quite apropos that it's a south node eclipse at the end of this cycle. But I was just, the angel that rules this degree is Aniel. Now, one of the mottos or keywords, if you want to look at it, associated with Aniel is looking at the big picture and breaking the circle. I think that's really interesting what we was talking about whether you go from my enforced practicality or your reconsideration of ideas. There's that spit and polish aspect to it of, right, I'm still doing this, but I'm not doing it that way, or I'm not going to include that thing.
Good. Yes. That's a very good way to think about it, because the South Node is about realizing what's been outweighing in your life, and it should be thrown away. So and it's got to do with spirituality in the sense that you need to be well connected to your subtleties, to your subjectiveness, in order to realize what's bothering you, what's being too heavy, and what needs to be gotten rid of or ejected out, which is a South Node kind of allegory. And yes, sorry. And you have that whole bundle of eclipses that's happening in Gemini and Sagittarius, which started earlier last year. You have them coming to a close, and it's normal to examine both topics related to the houses that they were affecting, and seeing how one was affecting the other, how one was connected to the other through the whole process. So make an analysis, a thorough analysis of these past 18 months, and try to think what in those two topics has been changed, how you've performed that change, how the moments of the eclipses were pivotal for that particular narrative. I can pinpoint in my life, in my particular narrative, each of the moments when there was a shift, and each of the of how the eclipses, each of them was important to that particular narrative, and how it contributed to now me having a completely different view on those two houses and how I deal with them in my life. So it's what you should do at this eclipse in particular.
Absolutely. The Sabian symbol for this degree, a widow's past is brought to light. And the narrative to do with this is saying that the past can never be forgotten until we have dealt with what we need to deal with fully, and finally, notwithstanding the uplifting joy that a new dawn is coming. The past still has to be dealt with. Karma can't be sidestepped. And you look at the decan of this, of the eclipse, it's the decan of the 9 of Wands. Now, as a reader, one of the, you've got the wounded warrior, and we're all absolutely exhausted. A year and a half of doing nothing, and all of a sudden we're going like what feels like turbo speed. And there's, because we can talk about the eclipse window in a moment, because I've certainly been frazzled by it.
Yes.
But there's I got distracted by that now. There's that sense of nearly there. Like what I was saying about the spit and polish on your ideas or on your direction or what have you. It's like the night before you take a classic car. Here's me talking about nothing I know about, right? For a change. It's the night before you take a classic car to a show. You're going to be there polishing all the chrome. You're going to be there checking that the engine is working, checking that all the brake fluid's there, and etc., all the car stuff that car people do. But there's certainly that image of shining it up as much as possible and making sure it's giving that biggest impact. So there is a promise from this eclipse, not that this eclipse will enable you to make an impact, you know, as a result of the eclipse, but it's preparing you to make an impact later.
Well, I would say even that it's finishing up something. It's not even just preparing you to make an impact later. It's just this sense of passing the baton. It's like there was these problems that you were facing at that time of your life, but this chapter is ending. And it's obviously it's giving the necessary information for the next chapter to start. And this is what I feel like this moment is right now. We were going, I feel like, through a preparatory kind of scenario before Jupiter ingressed into Pisces for good, and then into Aries later this year. And I feel like that preparatory stage is coming to a close now. And now you're going to start new things for good, in the sense that we are going to remember, the 2 years of the pandemic were crazy. Things that happened were crazy. We were ending 2021 without knowing if we were going to go back to 2020 or not, or if we were going to be able to move forward to 2022. Still, we managed. This is what I think is going to happen. I think that even though the pandemic, we need to be careful and we need to take the necessary precautions, I think that we are going to see a better state of things than we had to deal with earlier in 2020, even though the surges of the new variants are worrying. And I think that because of the lack of the malefic influence, besides the fact that it's an eclipse and Mercury is debilitated, it's just making us realize what needs to be finished, what needs to be round up and let go of in order to move forward. And this is going to be effectively changing things, effectively finishing things and being like, nope, not it anymore. I'm taking my action. I'm doing what I need to do. I'm not overthinking this anymore. I'm not spending my time suffering about something that I cannot decide. I'm just going to act on it. And it's necessary that you do that. Life is going to be trying to stop you. It's going to be trying to show you the lack side of things through that Venus retrograde. It's like, oh, I wish things were different. I wish I had, as the widow, you were saying, my husband's still with me, or things from my past that are there, still haunting me to this day, even though it's not my reality anymore. Those desires are going to have to be let go of. And in order to do that, you need to find yourself in a new environment, to crave new things, to desire new things. And this is why this process, such as the Venus stationing, is going to feel slow. It's going to feel like you're being retarded and put off. But it's just you getting used to this new newness that you're causing in your life around you, because you're just changing things that are uncomfortable, and you're doing it naturally. You're not overthinking it.
Which is a perfect 9 of Wands allegory, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that whole of nearly there, defend how far you've got come, nearly there.
It's like we're already here.
One last push, if you look at it in tarot terms, to that 10 of Wands, but you've gathered all your sticks together and you're ready to go walking up that hill to the village. Exactly. Is there anything else?
Good that the malefics are not. Yeah, it's really good that the malefics are not afflicting this configuration such as they were in the previous ones, at least by Mars being conjoined to it. Now it's just a harmless sextile from Saturn, and it's separating, and Jupiter is in sextile ruling that configuration. So we do have a good path to cover. We do have a fertile ground to plant our seeds on right now, even if it is a bit unstable, if it seems a bit unstable.
What about what about Saturn though? Because surely it still has power within the charts with regarding rulership.
Oh yes,
it's ruling
again.
Venus.
We are answering to that whole Saturnian narrative.
It's ruling Jupiter, which is ruling the whole eclipse area.
Mhm.
So yeah, that Saturn's.
It's like changing your narrative.
Wow.
Yeah, adapting your narrative according to what the larger perspective of things is requiring of you. This is how I would describe it in simple terms, in short terms.
Right. Is there anything else we want to draw out of this chart then?
Maybe just tell the mutable people that they're in for a wild ride, but they are going to be just doing things the most naturally from all the other signs, the ones that have mutable angles. The ones that have the fixed angles, they're going to be a little bit more worried about the proceeding. They are feeling a bit uncertain at this moment. However, don't worry about that. And the fixed signs are Scorpio, Leo, Taurus, and Aquarius. Those are, if those of you who have the ascendant in one of those will have your fixed signs in the angles. So don't worry. You may want to move a little more carefully, but you still nonetheless need to act now. You know, there's no space for waiting. You need to keep going.
Which should
the
be
cardinal
okay
sign.
for the cardinal then.
Yeah, the cardinal signs are not the ones experiencing the worst of it. They might feel like they don't have such a clear path ahead of them, and that might be tiresome, but they're feeling motivated. At least they're going to have that motivation to go forward and to try and achieve those goals, even though they don't know exactly how they're going to finish. They're going to be more motivated. The mutable signs are just going to be, okay, if I do this, then that's going to happen. I should do this. You know, the mutable signs are going to be the clearest heads of all this.
So these eclipse charts are not like the normal lunation charts that we do that would be covering 2 weeks or 4 weeks period. This can be energies and statements that are around us for up to 6 months, would you say? Or are you a 3-month person?
No, very well pointed out. That depends. There are people who use different methods to time the effects of the eclipse. Some people, for instance, use the time that the eclipse is in effect. So if for instance, that last lunar eclipse that we had that was 6 hours long, it would have been like 6 months long. Yeah. Or even if because it's in Taurus, it could be even 6 years. A narrative that follows us through 6 years that's starting now. So I don't really consider those long-term effects because I haven't studied these eclipse cycles to that depth right. In a mundane sense. Now, with and so I like to keep them to their own timing. So from one eclipse season to the next, what was the topic that arose around one particular eclipse? And how was that particular topic developed once the next eclipse happened 6 months later? Mm-hmm. And I will keep it concise to those 2 houses that they are affecting in your chart and in your personal life. Now, this particular eclipse is special, even more special, because not this particular eclipse, but these eclipses that are starting now in Venus and Mars signs, Taurus and Scorpio. Because we will have this Venus retrograde in Capricorn for the next few months. And basically Mars and Venus are going to be together holding hands up until the next set of eclipses start in Taurus and Scorpio. So this narrative, this particular narrative, this eclipse is going to be being developed by those 2 rulers of those signs in between these eclipses. So anything that's happened now with the Taurus Sagittarius eclipse, but this Sagittarius eclipse, see what's closing down in those 2 houses of Gemini and Sagittarius, tie it back to the previous narrative, as I said, so in the past 1.5 years. But with the Taurus Scorpio one, try to notice what's coming up with the topics related to the Scorpio and Taurus houses in your chart, and see how the Venus and Mars dynamic throughout the next few months, which is going to be pretty tight, will affect those particular topics in your life. It's going to be volatile. It's going to be changing constantly, but it is an area that promises to be a long-term thing. because of the fixed signs and because of Venus and Mars nature itself, which is very creative and fertile combination to have.
And we've managed
like,
to discuss all of that without making too much of a mention of the fact that we've got that consistent backdrop of the Saturn-Uranus square.
Well, yeah, it's the further you go in the spheres of influence, because Saturn is the outermost sphere of the visible planets, and Uranus is the immediately next, the one immediately after. So you have those two outer planets, those two heavyweights, those two trendsetters, let's put it that way, in a conflictuous aspect, which has made make up for some difficulty in organizing our society in a way that will make it move forward progressively, instead of just, you know, asking us to review these societal problems that we've had for centuries. This square is still going to be in effect throughout 2022. It's still going to be very felt throughout 2022. And there are some moments where it's going to be pretty close to exact again throughout next year that will guarantee we do not forget the instability that coronavirus brought and how it's shown a light into some social matters that will impact generations to come. Much like the 60s impacted us and then still impact us until this day in terms of social movements. We saw some of those things in 2020. We are still seeing them rise up, and I still think we are going to continue seeing them throughout next year.
Well, there's been a lot of inequalities that got exposed, but not a great deal has happened about them. So one would hope that some of these inequalities might actually get addressed with this energy.
But that's the thing, once they are exposed as inequalities and not just as something that society accepts as the norm, then real change can happen. So what you are witnessing right now is the beginning of change. We have seen, of course, in the past some issues being addressed, but not in the same light that they are being addressed now. And each of these social upheaval moments that we have that bring this narrative, the same narrative to light, and we seem to be dealing with the same thing over and over. Well, if we look at the past, no, we are not dealing with the same thing. It is the same topic, but it's wildly different than it was in the 60s. We have a very different approach to it socially, in society-wise. We think about it differently now. We see it differently because of what was done in the 60s. So even though it's a long-term process, longer than one human life can see progressing, it's still a progressive narrative. It's still something that is being continuously written as it goes. It's not falling backwards. We're not going backwards in this sense, at least not now.
Let's hope. There's, I mean, I say let's hope, but no, I do actually agree with you. Right, that's so, to conclude, should be a wild ride because it's an eclipse.
Yeah, but better than the previous eclipse and the previous lunations. It's going to be volatile, however, motivational and profitable to some extent.
Yeah, constructively so.
Yeah.
Okay, so David, what have you got going on at the moment?
Well, I still have my usual gigs going on. I teach. For those of you who do not know, I realize I didn't mention that here enough. I offer tutoring sessions if you guys need it, from beginner stage astrologers to people who are more advanced, meaning they know some techniques and they want to improve, they want to have some practice. I'm already a practicing astrologer for a couple of years now, so I can offer some insight in how to apply some of the techniques that I apply here to these charts and what I know how to do with natal astrology. For those of you who want to start your careers and don't quite know how to go about your charts, if you want to have those sessions, I'm here for you. Also, regular appointments, such as, you know, your solar return readings, annual readings if you want. I use solar return in annual readings, but they can be done at any point in time. So if you want them for your 2022, just talk to me. We'll arrange a time, and we'll have the session about your whole year, and how you can plan ahead, natal readings and all. I have my website, in the first place, astrology, and Facebook page, Instagram in the first place, if you guys want to check that out as well.
And as ever, all the links will be down in the description below. If you want to stop sharing now, David.
Yeah.
All the links will be in the description down below. So if you're wanting to get a hold of David or myself, that's the place to go. Just a brief channel announcement, as you may have noticed, video readings from myself are slow at coming out at the moment. That is likely to continue between up until the other side of Christmas, because someone mentioned, I think it might have been written in the stars by Rux or Rick Levine or Ksenia or one of them, that apparently I will be busy from last Monday to January the 25th. Yeah, they got that right. So one thing I will be making an effort to do is these shows with David. If we get chance, it'd be nice to look at maybe the solstice chart when
Definitely.
when that's it's not that far away, is it?
No, it's in about 20 days, but yeah, we can definitely take a look at it.
Yeah. Okay. 20. No, I'm looking at the wrong bit on my computer. Yes, 20 days. Hopefully, I can get my backside into gear and have a good look at that chart and the lunation charts as ever. So thank you very much. Like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Let us know if what we have said has resonated with you.
Please.
Or if you've seen it in action, because that's always, yeah, we was going to talk about the eclipse window, because since the lunar eclipse and up until, I can't wait for Saturday in a way, because I have been frazzled by things coming dum, 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 one after another.
Yes.
New thing, old thing, new thing, old thing, you know.
It does feel like that, yeah.
It's been a perfect and very emotional up and down, and you can see the Saturn-Uranus square going on, but you can also see these things that are just coming out of nowhere. And I've had moments of delirious joy and moments of practical nervous breakdown, you know. So
yes.
Thank God we've only got to go till Saturday, and then that chart lasts for 6 months.
Yes,
so on that positive note, thank you very much. Like I said, like, share, subscribe, and we will see you later.
See you.